under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, I'd like to welcome everyone at home and here. Our agenda this evening is going to be quite short. We'll have the consent agenda, which consists strictly of the minutes from the last meeting. We have an alternative sign plan for Verizon. We have also on the agenda 3 items for the villas at Parkway Estates, which we will need a motion on, then other business, and then we will adjourn. That being said, I would entertain a motion on the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is the sign plan for Verizon. Mr. Hawley.
Turn these on. Okay, good evening. Tonight before you is the approval of an amendment to the Adams Dairy Landing Alternative Master Sign Plan to allow a wall sign on the east elevation of a building that has not been built yet, but is to come soon. The building will be located on the north side of Northeast Coronado Drive, west of Adams Dairy Parkway. It will be east of the new Olive Garden restaurant. The property is zoned general business in the restricted overlay. That would be the Adams Dairy Landing restricted overlay. Verizon Wireless has offered you 2 options and is proposing 3 wall signs for this particular property. The wall signs would be located on the north facade, be up here, on the south facade down here, and then on the east facade in this northeast corner of the building. If you will turn to page 5 of 7 in the staff report. There is a chart there with the measurements, and it provides the measurements for options 1 and options 2. Both of those options, the signs will meet the dimensional requirements for the sign code as well as the UDC. The only sign that's in question tonight is the sign that is located on the east facade. And because that particular facade does not have a main entrance, that sign per the UDC would not be allowed. The reason for that is because when they originally had their alternative master sign plan approved, they did not get an approval specifically for this sign. It did say that each building could have 3 signs, but because they didn't specify that the sign had to be either over a main entrance or along a roadway, because this sign is not over a main entryway, it's not allowed. So I'm going to put up the 2 sign proposals to give you an idea of the difference. This is option 1, and the second option has a little bit more square footage, but is very similar. The difference obviously being that they have 2 lines of text in their option 2. Again, as I said, both meet the sign code. One of the issues that came up in the staff report is that one of the letters in this particular, and in this case it would be the Z, I believe it's in option 1, does exceed the, excuse me, does exceed the maximum size, but because there is a provision within the master sign plan that specifically states that with the approval of the developer, they can go over. The developer provided us a letter, and that's included with the staff report, stating that they had no objections. And that provision was specifically put in for something very similar to this. I think when it was talked about on the original approval, they talked about perhaps, like for instance, something like the Gap having a very large G that exceeded the maximum size, but the A and P would be smaller. So in this case, it's the Z. With that, the staff recommendation, as is typical, is for denial of the master alternative sign plan amendment, that being simply the sign located on the east facade. And we make that recommendation simply because that is consistent with what we typically do. If it doesn't meet the sign code, we typically do not recommend that it be approved. However, it's up to you, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them.
Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. If this is approved and Verizon, for one reason or another, vacates this building, does that authorize whoever takes the place of them in the future to have a sign there?
That's a good question, and I think it would somewhat depend upon whether or not you approved it specifically for Verizon, with the caveat or condition that basically any future tenant would have to come back and show you, request the same master alternative sign plan amendment, or if you just approved it straight as a master sign plan amendment without any specificity to Verizon itself.
Okay.
Any other questions? Ms.
I do
Evans?
have a question. If on the third sign, since the building's not built, would it still be visible possibly if another building, when the next building goes next door from I-70?
Yes. I can't tell you for sure, and they didn't provide us with line of sight drawings. I will tell you that to Verizon, they think this sign is very important from staff standpoint. When you look at the overpass for Adams Dairy, you look at the speed of traffic on I-70, and then you look at the grades as you come off onto Adams Dairy Parkway and look back up. I find it hard to believe that this sign will be extremely visible to anyone as far as being a sign that would grab you off the freeway. I don't think you're going to see it in time, if you see it at all. But again, they have a different view on that, and I'll let them address that. We did not get line of sight drawings that show what they think that visibility would be.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Holland.
Thank you.
Would the applicant like to give us a presentation?
Hi, nice to see you again. It's been a month or so. My name is Andy Edwards. I'm the retail real estate manager for our Kismo region, so Kansas and Missouri, located here in Overland Park, so local to the area. I'm glad I don't need to. I thought I was also going to be talking about the sign height today, so I'm glad to hear that I won't necessarily have to address the height of our Z, since our folks designed a wonderful looking logo that unfortunately takes up a lot of height for us. But when it comes to the east sign, and it is kind of hard for us to tell as well, because the building is not built as of today, so we're going off the way we think it's going to be visible from the highway, is as you crest over the overpass over Adams Dairy Parkway, heading westbound on I-70, we feel a sign on the east side of the building would be tremendously visible, and would actually give us a lot better visibility than the sign that is on the north side of the building, because you, as you're going 70 miles an hour down the highway, would have to turn at the right time to see it off to the left. With regards to future buildings that are being built, I mean, I've heard who I think it's going to be, but we feel that that building will be far enough off of the highway, further away from the highway, that would still lend itself to where our sign would be visible. Also, you mentioned about the possibility of us having a sign if there was a major entrance on that side of the building. And we considered that at one point in time. Unfortunately, our prototype, the way our buildings typically lay out, we like our buildings to be deeper rather than wider because of the way the showroom lays out. So instead of trying to manipulate things to make it work for our signage, we wanted to be true to the way our corporate prototype was on the interior, and therefore we've asked for a variance for us to do the side sign on the east side of the building. Other than that, if you have any questions.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Edwards?
Can I ask just a quick question?
Sure, Mr. Billups.
Just for our own guidance, do you have a preference over 1 or 2?
That's why I was going to speak to it originally, but since they answered it for me, really we prefer option number 1. And the reason why typically I wouldn't provide 2 options. But because the building's not yet built, there's still a lot of time between now and the time we open for business there. Obviously, option number 1, I'm not sure how to turn that on or to show this. Is for Verizon only with no wireless. Now, as of today, you won't see this anywhere in Kansas City. This is something with our corporate marketing strategy that you'll start seeing with a Checkmark and Verizon. There's a lot of marketing now you won't see with wireless. They're doing that just strictly because right now we feel we're at a competitive disadvantage to a company like AT&T that happens to have three letters in a symbol. It allows each one of their letters to be much larger, and that being more visible from a distance. So we would prefer to go with option number 1, that's just the Verizon. It's only, the V in the Verizon is only 5 inches taller, but we found that 5 inches, because it makes each one of those letters slightly larger, it makes them much beefier and much easier to read from a distance. So that's strictly the reason why we would choose number 1. But
Any other questions or comments for the applicant? All right, thank you very much, Mr. Edwards.
thank you.
Any discussion? Quiet group tonight.
Just like to make a comment, it's glad to see another new business come to town and do business in our fine city. And I personally, advertising is the main key to getting people in the door. And I'm in support of the option 1 personally.
Just, you try option 1, you mean just the one word, Verizon, or?
Option 1 that they requested.
Yeah, just having Verizon.
Is it my understanding that they both meet the guidelines?
Mm-hmm. Yes, they do.
Okay, so,
If there's no other questions, Madam Chairman, I make a motion to approve. Just put my glasses on too. See if I can do this. Number ASP 8-10-2695, Verizon Wireless Adams Dairy Landing, on option 1 with the 2 staff recommendations.
I have a motion
Second.
and a second. Is there any discussion concerning Mr. Sullivan's comments about the building?
okay, when you say with the staff's recommendation, we're voting for the additional wall sign?
Yes, the staff's recommendation, what I believe Mr. Haney's
Your-
saying is,
your
yes, he
motion
wants
was-
to approve the request, subject to the staff conditions, which were, if we approved it, there were 2 conditions to be met.
If we approve it.
Yes. Okay, is everybody clear on that, and there's no more discussion?
And that would allow the 3 signs?
Yes.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay?
All right, we have 1. Motion carries. All right, that brings us to items 3, 4, and 5. The city council moved to push back to us the rezoning items that we heard at our last meeting on the villas at Parkway Estates. So at this point, the thing to do would be to have a motion for items 3, 4, and 5, which is the overlay, the preliminary plat, and the final plat, move to the next meeting, which is the meeting we will again hear the request for rezoning. Mr. Roy Allen had presented a different plan to the city council than what we had seen and what we voted on. So we're back to square one on that. So if I could have a motion on those 3 items, and we will visit those at the next meeting.
Madam Chair, would you like one motion or 3 separate motions?
I think we could probably roll them all into one.
I would move that we postpone items 3, 4, and 5 to the September 27th meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. All right, very good. That brings us to number 6, other business. Mr. Allen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. At each of your seats, we have a flyer for some training coming up. It's called Planning and Zoning Procedures for Missouri Municipalities. It's going to be much more exciting than the title leads on to being. But this is a result of, I think it's every other month we meet, a group of Eastern Jackson County planning directors, we call it, with assistant planning directors and other planners involved as well. But we've been meeting for last several months just to try to keep the 3 municipalities involved, Blue Springs, Independence, and Lee Summit, kind of all up to speed with what each community is doing, you know, different task forces, for example, code changes, projects, things that relate to perhaps things just beyond their borders that could impact the other cities. So it's been a very good kind of working group and discussion group, and out of that, based on budgetary constraints and a lot of new planning commissioners, especially at the other 2 municipalities, but trying to bring together some joint training for all 3 cities for their planning commissions. And this is the first one of those, and we're hoping to do this on a quarterly basis. Again, free of charge, and it's really pretty much staff-led and directed. And the first to host is City of Independence. You'll be hearing presentations from each city on a generic topic, so to speak, zoning, subdivision regulations, things like that. Some basic training. But they're hosting it Tuesday, October 19th at the new Midwest Genealogy Center on Lee Summit Road in Independence. So I don't know if anybody has been there before, but it's supposed to be a state-of-the-art, beautiful building, and as a part of that, there's an optional, or actually they would like to make it required, but there's a tour at 5:30 with the training starting at 6 o'clock with light dinner, and hopefully have everybody out of there before 8 o'clock. So it's an off night in terms of our meetings. It's an off night for their planning commission as well, and if anything, an opportunity to just network and commiserate with other planning commissioners in the other 2 cities, and just talk about some of things that you've experienced or that they've experienced, and again, just some networking as well. But we mentioned some of the topics here, just basic planning and zoning information, duties of the planning commission, talk about comprehensive planning, zoning, subdivision regulations, kind of looking at a lot of state statutes that govern all 3 cities, but then hopefully share some individual references and anecdotes as well. So with that, I don't want to belabor this, but want to give you a little background as to where this is coming from. And we're hopefully, again, every quarter going to have a different topic, for example, not just repeat this every quarter, but you look at planning law, some of the things that Mr. McDonald has provided in the past, the training with the video and liability type thing. So do that more in a larger group setting. So with that, I do want to just finish by saying that we'd like to have RSVPs, preferably by our next meeting, So you can let us know at the next meeting is fine. But if you know ahead of time, if you are able to attend, or even if you aren't, you can, again, just let us know. Can't make it, or we will make it so that they can start planning ahead for seats and materials and things like that.
Very good. It'll be interesting to see how some of their duties and regulations, subdivision regulations, differ from what we have. When we read the magazine, the commissioner and so forth, we see some communities are very, very different from what we do. So it'll be interesting to see what our neighbors are doing. So hope
Very good.
everybody can attend that.
Yeah, that
And-
would be wonderful.
Yeah, hope everybody can attend. All right, very good. Is any other business to be brought before the commission? I'd entertain a motion.
So moved to adjourn?
Second?
Motion second, all in favor? Aye. We are adjourned.
Perfect.